Hello, everyone. Welcome to an extraordinary Bleeding Blue podcast, episode 48. We have an incredible guest. Ladies and gentlemen, today's guest is the co-host of one of Canada's most famous Blue Jays podcasts. They have had astonishing guests from catcher Danny Jansen, Matt Gage, former Blue Jay, Davis Schneider, former Jays manager John Gibbons, Baseball Insiders Arden Zwelling, Ben Nicholson, Keegan Matheson, the list goes on. They've accumulated over 5,000 followers on YouTube. They also host a monthly baseball discussions at the comedy bar called Baseball Town, where they discuss all things baseball, Blue Jays, with, again, some incredible guests. It is safe to say that these guys know what they are doing regarding baseball and podcasting. Without further ado, please welcome Scott Belford of the WALKOFF podcast. Scott, thank you.
Ryan, it is so good to be here, man. And congrats on the Bleeding Blue podcast. It's rising in its, I know that you boys aren't in it as deep as we are. We've been doing it for like 5 years now, but it's good. It's always good to see another podcast pop up. So well done.
Absolutely. I love how all the podcasts have just been able to come together. Like there's so many other ones out there too. Like we got Blue Jays Today is awesome.
Yeah.
They're great. The one with Zoobs, I forget the Less Than Jays.
Less Than Jays.
And
Gate 14.
Yes.
Yeah, there's a bunch of them. You bet.
There is a bunch of them. And they're all great though, too. I think Toronto has done such a good job in Toronto Blue Jay sports. We have very, very good quality podcast and discussions of Blue Jays around. It's very, very, very good. Blue Jays Central does such a great job too at
absolutely
the Blue Jays. And then Blair and Barker, they're like super huge. They have become one of the biggest, I guess, podcasts and of Blue Jays baseball. It's awesome. So
the Kings, if you will, the Kings. Yes, I know. I know Jeff Blair has come on the podcast numerous times, and he's such a seasoned old vet. You can just tell he's got like those broadcasting chops from way back when it was a far more professional kind of like, media's kind of transitioned from, the traditional radio way to more podcasts and online and stuff like that. But he's done it all. I love Jeff Blair. I think Blair and Barker is one of the more entertaining podcasts out there, because I don't know about you, Ryan, I get the feeling that like they like each other, but just enough to work with each other. And that dynamic is so beautiful.
It absolutely is. Well, I think the reason, the dynamic is perfect. And, you need some arguing. You need a little bit of that in order to be entertaining. And they definitely do argue, because obviously on one hand, Jeff Blair is this experience. He's been a baseball insider his whole life. And then Kevin Barker, on the other hand, is an actual baseball player. So they're always comparing the two. It's like, well, I've been inside a clubhouse and I've talked to these players and I know everything. That's always going back and forth. You love it. But anyway, let's get it started though. And I had my first question for you though, right here was, for 4 years, you've been working on this podcast, and over 5, I guess. But out of all the things to come out of it, we were talking about this a little bit before. What has got to be the coolest thing you've done because of the podcast? Person you met or thing you've done? What has it been? Top thing.
Honestly, it wasn't my favorite interview, but getting to sit down and chat with Mark Shapiro, president of the Blue Jays, was pretty surreal. Like you just understand how much their time is worth. And for him to carve out 30 minutes as the president of baseball operations, like that's something that if you had told me as a kid, I wouldn't have even believed it, like that I was being given the time to talk with someone so high up in the Blue Jays rankings who had so much to do with the decision making and building the team we're currently watching. So that was pretty cool. But my favorite player growing up was Sean Green. So he 30 stolen bases, 30 home runs in the late 90s. Him and Carlos Delgado were kind of the similar trajectory as Bo and Vlad came up through the system together, had all the hype. And then in 2000, the Blue Jays ownership group, which was still a few years away from Rodgers buying them, had decided they had to strip payroll down, and Sean Green wound up getting traded to the Dodgers for no other reason than they just couldn't afford to re-sign him, or in their mind they had to keep one or the other. They wound up losing Delgado because Delgado didn't want to sign without Green because the team wouldn't be good, and that's kind of how that all played out. So I got to sit down with Sean Green and interview him for an hour, and that was just like, I don't know, man, like the little kid in me came out, like I just remember being 15 and like idolizing this guy, and to actually, like, 20 years later being able to sit down and talk his approach and the game of baseball. It was pretty cool. So those are a couple of the highlights. But honestly, dude, there's stuff about running a podcast that I hadn't even fathomed being very cool. Like the constant interaction with the listeners, like I'm on Twitter and people DM me all the time and have baseball questions all the time. And I almost have to like put a cap on how much time I give that, because I could just, my wife gets on my case about just like, who are you messaging? And I'm like, I don't really know. Like,
Yeah. No, that's
Yeah, but
awesome.
that's cool.
Yeah, do you have people come up to you I assume you do, at the Jays games? Like, will people come up to you and take photos and things like that?
Yeah, that's been kind of cool too. I know we were in Dunedin for spring training, and that kind of surprised me. We got stopped a dozen times, maybe not quite half a dozen, maybe, but like, and yeah, anytime I go to the Dome, I'm always stopped for, just to be told either the podcast is great or it sucks. Or
Yeah.
I had a Yankees fan stop me and he's like, I don't like all your thoughts on the Yankees, but I actually appreciate the Blue Jays insight. And he's like, you guys do a good job of not being too biased. So,
Okay.
like stuff like that's always cool. Yeah,
You're
for
right.
sure.
You're right. You mentioned you went to Dunedin, I guess, to watch the spring training game. The shirt right here from the spring training facility
Nice.
was one of the greatest experiences of my life. Maybe the best vacation I went on. But how about you? You gotta let's hear it. Like, what was the best part of that Dunedin trip? Like, the
There
games
is
are
something
awesome. But yeah,
there is something really special about spring training because the games don't mean anything. So there's
yeah,
like this real relaxed, inviting atmosphere where maybe there isn't the dynamic you run into in regular season games where there's the rivalry between the crowd, and if there's other opposing teams fans there, maybe it's not the friendliest, or but in spring training it's so who cares that, like, it's more of a celebration of baseball,
yeah.
which I loved, and also and believe me, Ryan, I've tried really hard to turn this down as I get older because it's so silly to let a professional sports team dictate your emotional well-being, but I still struggle with that. So like,
Um,
it's nice being in a situation like spring training where if the Jays do lose, whatever, we're still going to go for supper. The game doesn't matter anyways. It's going to be a nice night. And I
yes.
also love that spring training is all day games. So you do have your evening afterwards. It's cool.
You're right. No, I had a blast this past spring training. And again, like we're
Were
it's
you there this March
I
too?
was there this March, yeah.
Awesome.
Yep, yeah,
Is
I went.
Dunedin not like such an underrated gem? Like I found myself just like blown away by the little city of Dunedin. Like
Yeah.
it's not what I was expecting with Florida. I'll tell you that.
All the Uber drivers we talked to, we just be asking like, so what's like the best part about this town? And they're just like, everything about this
Yeah.
place is incredible. And it's so funny like to hear somebody like who lives in the town just like absolutely talk about how incredible they just love it. They say it's the
Yeah.
best town in all of America. And honestly, I mean, getting to like just walk outside and there's like a Blue Jay stadium like there, and you can just like
Yeah,
walk
man.
like 10 minutes to a Blue Jays game and it's like 10 $15 or whatever it is for like
Yeah.
cheap seats. Yeah, like it's one of the coolest things ever. It's so cool. I'm jealous. I think when I'm like 70 or something like that, or it's 80 when I retire, I'm going down there. I'm moving
I'm
down there.
with you, Ryan. You and me,
Yeah,
buddy. Let's get our walkers and we'll just freaking make sure
really.
we're at a ball game once a day.
Absolutely. No, it sounds like it's just I'm so jealous of it. But yeah, anyway. Another question I wanted to ask though. You are a comedian, obviously, as we know. You are a comedian, as we know, and now a content creator. You've possibly chosen two of the most challenging and competitive jobs in the world. And how do you keep yourself motivated
Yeah.
and confident during this time and doing these two jobs?
Oh my God, man. If I had a good answer for that, I'd probably be making more money. But so determination and just not giving up, I guess, is really the easy answer there. I mean, when it comes to comedy, it was such a long haul before I could actually start to make money. And you spend so much time perfecting the art and getting an act together, and then you kind of get this act that is saleable and worth money, and then you're like, oh shit, now I need to learn the ins and outs of the business side. Like it was a lot of trial and error, a lot of part-time jobs lost, the willingness to lose a job over going on the road or whatnot, because there is like this transition period. I found between year 5 and 10 of comedy was really difficult because I wasn't at a point where I could make enough money financially with stand up.
Yeah.
But the graph was quickly flipping on me, so like I was making more at stand up than my day job, and so the hours had to be decreased, and I kind of hit this point where I had to make a decision of like the 30% of my income that this part-time job is having, can I, if I take the leap, can I make up for that 30% with just stand up, and being on the road more? And I mean, it did wind up working out, like I'm 16 years in now, and I mean, I travel the world. I play cruise ships. I'm all over the country of
Oh,
Canada. So it has worked out, but no, it was a battle of attrition, I guess, is a good way of putting it. Like there's a lot of roadblocks, and there's a lot of reasons why it's really tough to make a living as a stand-up comic in Canada without going to the States. And even with going to the States, that's a lot of work because there's so much money involved in getting your green card and getting your visas and getting down there. And then you're kind of starting over, like a lot of the stand-up comics in Canada are as good, if not better, than their American counterparts. I know I've participated in competitions like the Seattle International Comedy Competition where, I was right there with some of these guys that had literally just done their Conan the week before, or was on Last Comic Standing. But there isn't the industry in Canada to kind of push these comedians up into
yeah.
stardom. So it's a lot of road work, it's a lot of grinding. It's not the easiest way to make your living, which is why transferring into sports journalism and content creation wound up like I had already been struggling so much over the decade with comedy that when I went into this, I didn't expect anything of it. And I guess there's a fearlessness too to being able to like reach out to all sorts of people, which is why we've had such great success with our guests. Is like it was never a mental block for me to like reach out to John Gibbons. I
Yeah.
I there's lots of guys who are like, I don't know how you do it. I would never have the guts. And it never even occurred to me that that was like a gutsy thing. I was just like, well, like I've bombed in front of 100 people in Saskatoon before. Like, how bad can this be? It's just,
Yeah. Yeah. Okay,
uh,
cool. No, yeah, I wanted to ask then. So, have you noticed like you think being a comedian is a helpful aspect in terms of being a content creator or for like being a podcaster for the Walk Off podcast? Because when I first like heard that, like, oh, he's a comedian too, that's gotta like he that already means his personality is, quote unquote funny or whatever like that. So that's gotta help with the just being a personality on in content creation because people obviously are drawn to you when somebody is known to be, I guess, funny or whatever it is. But yeah,
where it's really helped me, Ryan, is in interviews and even situations
yeah,
like this, because when you're on stage, there's so much crowd work that goes involved in it, and you don't really know what is going to be the reaction coming back, and you don't know what anyone's going to yell and really even just like interact with you. So you get really good at these short bursts of interacting with a stranger, and that has definitely made this a lot easier to transition into
yeah,
small talk. It really has helped with small talk, which gets your guests comfortable, and then you can kind of dive into the questions and the preparation. That's the other thing too, is that stand-up comedy, everyone views it as like such an off the top of your head thing, and it's like, oh, it's such a skill, but there is so much writing involved, and there's so much preparation, and there's so much planning. And so when you kind of get used to that sort of behind the scenes work, it translates very well to podcasting,
Yeah.
right? Because, and I'm sure you can attest to this, right? Like, you've probably done shows where you haven't put in the time and the work, and you can notice it.
Yeah.
It's not just getting on the mic and talking baseball. You've obviously got to like know what you're talking about. People pick apart the little things. Hell, man, if you say a name wrong, like that's some of the comments I get the most, and people reaching on. It's like, you messed up this name
Yeah.
on the Milwaukee Brewers, their third string utility guy. How could you do that? And it's like, well, I'm sorry. I was just like reading the name, but
Yeah.
that is on me, right? Like, it
Yeah.
is on you to make sure that you do have the right pronunciation. And yeah, so just the prep is
Yeah.
what has really helped, is like just knowing that there's, with stand up there, you don't get the payoff for the prep until you're literally performing. And so it feels like homework, and getting over that mental idea of it is huge. And so that's why I think that's probably the biggest thing that has benefited me as a comic going into this, is just I know how to work behind the scenes, and I know how important it is.
Awesome. Who's your favorite comedian right now?
Oh, that's such a good question. Honestly, dude, it changes all the time. Like, I always see a new guy that I really am liking. Um, I really enjoy Rory Scovel. He's such a like goofy guy. I don't know if
Oh,
you've
I
seen
haven't
him.
heard of him. No,
So
yeah.
he's if you look him up, you'll recognize his face. He's been like a bit guy in a lot of comedies, and
Okay.
he's a recognizable dude. But he's a guy who like toured Canada a lot. He's American, but I have buddies who have worked with him firsthand. But he was really, really funny.
Cool.
The guy that got me into it was Brian Regan, is his name. I don't know if you've heard of Brian, but
Oh,
he's
I
like
have. Yeah.
he's a very clean comic. And that was like one aspect of his act that I really, really respected, was like just being so funny without being crude was really impressive. I mean, honestly, man, guys like Bill Burr, like, I love Burr, he's like the best of the best, but there's a reason he's the best of the best. So Shane
Mhm.
Gillis, I get a real kick out of him. His new special is fantastic.
Yep.
Um, yeah.
Cool. Cool. All right. Let's jump into some Blue Jays talk. I wanted to go down memory lane a little bit, talking about, again, because you've been probably a Blue Jays fan longer than I have. Not to make you feel old here, but
No, but I am.
but I wanted to ask, what do you think the best year you've watched of Blue Jays baseball ever has been? Because for me, it always has been. I'm pretty recent. It probably has to be 20. I want to say 2015, but it definitely is 2016, because that's when I really, really got into it and was watching
Yeah.
more, and just had a blast with all those players. I could name the roster of 1 through 40, a 40-man roster. So how about you though? Let's hear it.
So I was 10 and 11 when they won the World Series in 92 and 93.
Yeah.
Honestly, I enjoyed 2015 and 2016 more. I was in the city of Toronto. It was absolutely electric here. The fact that they did what they did in 2015 so unexpectedly, like, people always talk about what a mastermind Alex Anthopoulos was, but they kind of forget that his back was against the wall. He was on the verge of being fired, which is why Rogers had replaced the president with Mark Shapiro.
Yeah.
Is they, in their mind, when they were doing the interview process, this was a 50 and 52 team, and they were going to fire Anthopoulos at the end of the year because he'd already had the reins since I think it was 2008. I
Yeah.
forget exactly when they fired JP Ricciardi and put Anthopoulos in charge, but it's right around there. I'd need to look it up. But
Yeah.
yeah, so there was something that was just magic in the city. And, being older and knowing how special runs like that are, I always say, like, the Calgary Flames are my favorite hockey team. I was 7 when they won the Stanley Cup in 89. I was 10 and 11 in 92, 93 when the
Yeah.
Jays won. And as an 11-year-old boy, dude, I literally thought you just like follow your favorite team and then in a year or two they win it all, which is
Yeah.
like hilarious now looking back,
Oh,
30 years later. And it's like I haven't even seen anything close to it.
that is
So
terrible. Yeah.
So yeah, I would say 2015, 2016. 1998 is a really underrated year in Blue Jays fandom. I think, they were so close to making the playoffs, and this was before the second wild card and the third wild card, and they were just in a division with the Yankees and Red Sox when they were at their absolute best.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, the 98 Yankees are still infamously
Yeah.
good,
Yes.
so
Yeah.
that was a really frustrating year, and that was a year where they had Jose Canseco and Sean Green and Carlos Delgado and Roy Halladay
Yeah.
and like the list goes on and on. Their pitching was insane that year. They were getting so much out of like Escobar and like it was just a really fun team. And I think my age too helped is like I was 16 and like all my high school buddies were into it and they weren't supposed to be as good as they were. Like they went on a real run at the end of the year and just missed out by I think 2 or 3 games.
Yeah.
But yeah, so 98 was a fun year too, but no, I think I love this question by the way, but I think I got to go with 2015. I even remember where I was. I was driving a truck downtown Toronto, still working the day job. It was an events company, and I remember hearing the David Price news. And I remember pulling over the truck. I went online and guessed which game David Price would be pitching at, bought the tickets. It wound up being the case. So I actually got to see David Price's first game, which was insane, Ryan, because
Yes. I know. I
dude,
know. It's
like,
insane.
and those tickets were crazy expensive. Like, I remember my wife and I even talking, being like, should we sell them? Like, I bought them for like
Wow.
$25 and they were like going for like 150, but no, we went and
That is
watched it.
awesome. That's so cool
Yeah.
because I totally like all the time when like as just being a diehard Jays fan like yourself, I've gone back and just watched that game like with David
Oh,
Price. Whatever, what was it, like 12 strikeouts, 11 strikeouts,
it
something
was
like.
insane. It
Yeah,
was insane.
it was just awesome. What a welcome to the city. And yeah, I remember it was against the Twins, just incredible. And he's so great. He was so good for the Blue Jays. It's too bad that he ended up signing, obviously, with the Boston Red Sox, as we know, but and went on to win a World Series in 2018, and that one hurt as well. But
Yeah.
his time here was great. I can't say anything
And
negative.
honestly, man, I really do think like adding at the deadline like that. I know it's not quantifiable, which I mean, right away, as soon as you can't quantify something and put a number to it, baseball nerds get all upset and they like to dismiss it. But I really do think that there's a mental aspect to this game where when you add at the deadline, you really are signaling to your players that you believe, right?
Yeah,
And that was one thing I think took the 2015 Toronto Blue Jays aback a little bit, was that Anthopoulos believed as much as he did in that team. So to go out and add a David Price and all of the guys they added, I mean Troy Tulowitzki and Ben Revere and
yeah,
I mean Mark Lowe. I mean the list goes on and on of they went all in
yeah,
and it worked out. And listen, it probably works out in that scenario 1 out of 30 times.
yeah,
Like it's so rare. But
yeah,
I think there is something to be said for adding at the deadline. And I really do believe that one of the biggest faults this current front office has is that they didn't push their chips in when they could have. They didn't. Yeah, you sit around and talk about not believing in windows, right? And
yeah,
and we can be a perennial winner. We can be the Houston Astros. But how many Houston Astros are there?
yeah,
Like one. There's one. This is what you're gonna bet on. This is what you're thinking. There are windows and use them.
yeah. You're right. No, you're right because the Houston Astros are a great example of a team that uses their windows. Or I guess they're a team that believes in their team. I think that's another thing
Mhm.
is like they even when they this start of the season they were absolutely terrible, just terrible. They were in last place at one point. The Oakland A's were better than them at
Yes.
one point. All things were at an all-time low, but I think they're again the front office was just like just wait. They're gonna get better, and then they end up doing that. Now they're in first place, and they're probably gonna trade for a bunch of players at the deadline too, and make a run for the playoffs, and probably end up making the ALCS and
For
like
an 8th straight year,
for the eighth
yes.
straight year. Yeah. So it's again that's part of it. It's and they were never the Houston Astros before probably 2015 weren't a good team. It was once, they got Altuve, Correa,
Mhm.
and Springer, and they all had that. And now they're all of a sudden this powerhouse, and they've been a powerhouse for again 8 years. It's been incredible. It's great to watch, and it's something that the Jays need to look at and observe. And I know they had the old GM in, I forget who his name was, but was a part of the Blue Jays.
Yeah, James Click, that's
James
right,
Blake, yeah,
yeah.
he was in their organization, but now I don't think he is anymore. So now it's yeah, so it's just that's something that the Blue Jays need to look at is that Houston Astros. They're a team that is just perfect example of how you want your team to be run, I feel like. Other than
Ryan, do you think this team needs to rebuild? Where are you at on where this Jays team
I
is
was
at?
gonna ask you that. Well, I because I know Ross Atkins wants to he from what I've heard and from what I've seen is that he wants to be competitive in 2025. I
Yeah.
think the AL East is already such a beast right now. The Yankees, the Red Sox, the Orioles, even the Rays. The Rays are going to be great next year. They've got Jeffrey Springs coming back, Drew Rasmussen, Shane McClanahan.
Mhm.
They've got all the guys, and I don't. I think I want the Blue Jays to be good in 2025, and I don't want them to rebuild, but I think it's for the best, honestly. I think they should sign Vladdy for a long-term contract. That's fine.
Yes.
I want him forever. I want him because I love him. He's probably my favorite player, like of all time. So,
And
uh,
you're not alone, man.
yeah. So I think it might be for the best. Like, and I'm okay with that because then I have stress-free Blue Jays. I can just watch and have fun. I don't have to worry about watching and thinking like they're going to make the playoffs. Because that was me 2023. I probably lost like 10 years of my life just because of stress, like watching that team. Like because they were just
Yeah.
underperforming so much. And I don't know if you agree with me. It was last year was one of the most frustrating years of Blue Jays baseball I have ever
Yeah,
lived.
it was a hard year to watch. I
Yeah,
mean, the I don't think any of us. I mean, there might be a few people who saying, "I saw this coming." Like there's always the negative folks who like to call the win when something doesn't happen. I told you.
yeah,
It's like, well, did you? I mean, predicting a team's not going to make the playoffs in baseball isn't that bold and that great of a leap of faith here.
mhm,
But I don't think anyone really saw the drop off in offense coming quite like it did. I know I was guilty of maybe undervaluing how important Teoscar Hernandez was to this lineup,
yeah,
and even to a lesser extent, Lourdes Gurriel Jr. I really don't think that the Varsho trade is what did this team in. However, doing the Varsho trade and then expecting the offense to not regress, expecting the offense to just, next man up it just didn't happen.
yeah,
And whenever you put that sort of pressure on your pitching staff to succeed every single day, and I mean, we're seeing it right now in 2024, right? It's just any little problem, any little bump in the road, any little obstacle that comes your way, all of a sudden is that much bigger. When you give up a run on an error and on a team where scoring 3 runs your is so difficult,
mhm,
you're really putting yourself in a tough situation.
yeah. No, you're right. My next thing I wanted to talk about then is I guess this Jays trade deadline is coming up very quickly. Who do you expect to be traded away? Who do you think is a confirmation basically?
Honestly, Ryan, this is such a difficult thing to predict because we're really going on the lip service of this front office. And I don't know if I can trust what Ross Atkins is saying anymore. His job is on the line. In fact, I even wonder if he's already a dead man walking. Is this a guy who has had his hands cuffed, right? Like are these decisions going through him? Or are they going through Mark Shapiro and Shapiro has the final say because Atkins has already kind of decided, or I mean, obviously Ross hasn't made this decision, but Rogers has made the decision to move on from Atkins, but they don't want to fire him mid-season. So now he's just this figurehead that is obviously he's the head that's going to be chopped off at the end of the year. And do you want that guy making decisions? I know I sure don't. I mean, I'm kind of at the point where I've lost all faith in Ross Atkins as a general manager as it is. I think that he's a good general manager. I just don't think he's a great one. And to get to the promised land, you need to be great in this game. And he has had 9 years to do it. He's had his run. It's almost a decade. And I really strongly believe that you get one rebuild, you don't get two. You know, you get one kick at that can. And so that's where we're at. So with all of that said, who do I think is going to move? If he's telling the truth and they truly do believe that they are going to compete in 2025, then how can you move your biggest assets? And your biggest assets are Kevin Gausman and Chris Bassett.
Yeah.
These are the guys, they've got term. They've got another year of control. They're going to help any team that they go to a lot in 2024 and then again in 2025. So that adds extra value. These are the guys that, if you were actually looking into a rebuild, are your biggest chips. That's who you would want to move to get the most assets you can in return. And the Jays, if they're going to compete next year, need those guys. They need those horses at the front of their rotation.
Yeah.
So if those guys aren't being moved, then you're talking only expiring contracts. And if you're talking only expiring contracts, then you are still going to need to replace Yusei Kikuchi in that starting rotation, which is why it's been such a down year. It feels like everything that could go wrong has gone wrong, right? Ricky Tiedemann, #1 left-handed starting prospect in all of baseball. Just can't stay on the field. He's going through injury again right now. I know that he's going for, I think it's a third opinion on his arm. And Ryan, that's bad news, man. When you don't like the first two options, like pull at your collar, that is a yikes. Then you look at the second best prospect when it comes to left-handed pitchers in this organization, and it's going to be Adam Macko, Canadian kid. He's the prospect that the Blue Jays received with Eric Swanson in that Teoscar Hernandez trade. And Adam Macko, man, he has been incredible this season, killing it in Double-A. It was looking like he was on the verge of getting called up to Triple-A. Same thing, got shut down, elbow soreness, inflammation. So now your two top guys are down. I mean, Chad Dallas is an interesting prospect, but expecting him to take a big jump forward is asking a lot. So you need to go out on the open market and get a pitcher. So now you're talking like, what are you going to get back for Yusei Kikuchi? And you have to move him. You absolutely have to trade Kikuchi. He has probably got the most value of anyone on this team with an expiring contract. You absolutely have to move Jimmy Garcia. Same thing. Big back end of the bullpen arm who's going to get something in return. And then after that, man, you can pick around the edges. You can cross your fingers that there's a lottery ticket prospect that's going to work out in a couple years when it comes to guys like Justin Turner, Trevor Richards. Like, these are guys with value, but you're not going to get a ton in return for them. So when you start doing the math on this, how does this team compete in 2025? The only way I can see it happening is incredibly savvy trades with Kikuchi and Garcia, where they're getting actual major league talent back or the verge of major league talent. And then money going to the right places in free agency. And this front office hasn't shown the ability to nail that. Do they have some nice signings? Absolutely. Right? There's successes. Look at Yariel Rodriguez. I think that is a signing that we're, as Jays fans, going to look back on for years and be like, holy shit, we have a starting pitcher for $6.5 million a year. That was a great signing.
Yeah.
But it's just like, there's so many holes in this lineup, dude. I just
Yeah.
I just don't know how you compete. So I think this front office is keeping their cards close to the vest. Maybe we do see something shocking. Maybe we do see Chris Bassett moved. Maybe
Yeah.
we do see Bo Bichette moved, right? And that's the thing is like there's so many question marks between these two core guys in Bo Bichette and Vladimir Guerrero Jr. These are the guys this team has been building around, this front office has been touting as the next core. These are the guys everyone wants signed. And now we're at this spot where if the front office already knows whether they're going to sign or not, they have to make a move, right?
Yeah.
So if Bo and Vladdy have come out, Ryan, and said, we're out, we're going to free agency no matter what, it is malpractice by this front office to not move them for every asset they can get. And it
Yeah.
sucks. I
Yeah.
don't want to lose Vladdy. I know we talked about this off the front. I've got my Vladdy jersey. I want to wear it forever, and I want him to be in a Blue Jays uniform forever. Is Vladimir Guerrero Jr. the guy? Maybe not. He's not right now. He's the best guy on this team. He maybe isn't the 2021 version. And I know that when he is in a high pressure situation, maybe he's not there yet to put the team on his back and carry them. He's also 25. Like people forget Aaron Judge was a rookie in his age 25 season, right? Like
Yeah.
the soon to be MVP, like acting like there is a perfect trajectory for development is asinine. And
Yeah.
it gets me so worked up when people are so quick to dismiss Vladimir Guerrero Jr. as not being the guy. And it's like, he's so young. You can still build around this kid. Sign him, lock him up, overpay him if you have to.
Yeah.
He's a real legitimate talent and a guy that you need on any team needs a guy like this.
Yeah.
Now, is he Trey Turner or Bryce Harper? No. Could he be? Maybe. And when I say that, Ryan, I'm talking mentally, right? Like,
Yeah.
because Bryce Harper is a big moment guy, and he's got that experience and that focus. Trey Turner, big moment guy. These are guys with World Series to their name, right? Like, these are guys that, have rings.
Yeah.
And maybe Vladdy's not that guy, but can Vladdy be a huge contributing member to a team with a guy like that? Absolutely.
Yeah.
Those guys don't grow on trees.
You're right. Yeah.
So sometimes it's just better to bet on the horse you have and hope that he is that guy in his prime. Vladdy, I still believe, isn't even in his prime, dude. Like I
No.
really think age 26 to 32 is going to be where we see Vlad like really take the next step.
Yeah. I know. Yeah. Well, you look at it's very interesting to see. I'm curious to know though, what do you think his most significant change was then for Vladdy this season compared to the last two seasons? Because we've seen a pretty big leap from the last two seasons. I think he's taken on the fact that I'm the best player on this team. I've gotta act like that. I feel like maybe he's done that before and it's been a bit of a struggle for him. And because last year and the year before, it has, lots of ground out into double plays and with runners in scoring position, hitting the ball right into the ground. We've seen that before, but now he's just on this tear and he just looks so much more comfortable. I don't know. Do you notice that too?
I think that it was a major block mentally how his power dried up. And I think that sometimes you can get in your own head about something and make your own life that much more difficult. I mean, you looked at the exit velo on Vladimir Guerrero Jr. He's always at the
Yeah.
top of the league. And people are going to hate this answer too, man, but baseball, there's a lot of luck too. And sometimes
Yeah.
we're always trying to figure out a rhyme and a reason as to what's going on when the truth is things just even out in the end. And sometimes look at George Springer, buddy. Like, look at George Springer. He just went through the worst 70 game span of his entire career to the point where, Ryan, I was literally on the podcast asking, is he washed up? Is he done? Have
Yeah.
we seen the best out of George Springer? I don't know. And you look over the last 22 games, and he is literally, I think it's like his third best 21 game span in his career. Like,
Incredible, yeah. I know.
how do you make sense of it? There's luck involved, and then there's like we were
Adjustments.
talking about, just the determination,
Yeah,
not the the not giving up, right?
yeah,
George Springer, when John Schneider came out and said that the coaching staff had analytics that were saying that George Springer were on the verge of bursting out, I didn't believe them.
oh no, yeah,
And maybe they didn't. Maybe it was all lip service.
yeah,
Looks like it was real though now. And I know one of your questions is who do I think is going to be, and I don't want to jump ahead here, but like George Springer is going to be my answer for who I think is going to have the best second half of the season. I think George Springer is on a heater. I think that it's legit. I think he's found what was missing.
yeah,
And I think we're going to see him finish incredibly strong. I mean, he was a guy who was one of the worst OPSs in all of baseball. And
yeah,
I know that he was on pace to have the worst OPS of the last 100 years from a corner outfielder.
yeah,
And that's he's gonna finish above. He's gonna finish as an above average outfielder.
yeah,
Baseball's fucked, man. It is so weird. It is such a crazy game. It is constantly a battle of attrition with yourself, believing that these slumps, these highs and these lows. I mean, it's the old saying, right? You're never as good as you think you are, and you're never as bad as it seems.
yeah,
So
yeah. No, for sure. All right, let's move on to the next segment of the show where we'll be doing our second half predictions.
yes.
Uh, so right now we've got, I think we've got four here, five, something like that. Best position player second half, best pitcher second half, biggest regression for a position player, biggest regression for a pitcher, our final record, and who's going to be fired. Uh, I'll start it off here and then I'll give it to you. Uh, I think the best position player in the second half of the season, I think we've already seen it. To me, it's pretty obvious. I think Vladdy will just continue to
Yeah.
do the thing. Second half, he will be good. How about you?
Well, it's funny because even when you gave me this question, I was like, Vladdy is the easy answer here.
Yeah,
I think that it would be the least surprising thing to happen. But I am, like I touched on, I'm going to go with George Springer. I mean,
yeah,
if you look at what he had done up until June 24th, he was hitting 188, on base percentage of 278, which is disgusting. I mean, you really need to be on base at
yeah,
an above 300 clip, in my opinion, to warrant every day at bats.
yeah.
His slugging was 281, which is, Ryan, just the worst, man. Like, this is a guy that we relied on for 25 to 30 home runs when he's healthy, and he was just not hitting anything.
No,
Not hitting anything. A 281 slugging? Are you kidding me? An OPS of 559. I mean, I just talked about how he was on pace for one of the worst OPSs of the last 100 years for a corner outfielder. The guy was in the biggest slump of his career, 5 home runs, 15 RBIs. His exit velo was 86.5, dude. It was just bad, right?
yeah,
Since June 25th, he is hitting 377. He's got an OBP of 435. His slugging is 792. He's just under an 800 slugging. OPS of 1227. He's got 8 home runs in that time. Like, man, George Springer could still finish the season with 25 home runs, and
I
the
know.
first
Yeah,
half of the year he had 5.
crazy.
It's absolutely wild, man.
And
And
that, yeah,
exit velo 92. Like, that is a huge jump, man. That's 6 extra miles an hour off the bat. So yeah, my predictions, George Springer keeps up with what he's doing.
it's so funny you mention that because it's always just how you finish. That's the other thing. It's always how you finish the season. And I think of like Bo Bichette's season
Yeah,
in
2022.
where he just finished 290, had a 290 average, and it was quite incredible. Um, Next one, best pitcher second half. Who are you going with?
So I'm going to go with Kevin Gosman. I know that that's the easy answer. He has struggled a little bit this season, and I think a lot of it had to do with a few things. Number one, he had to get shut down in spring training and start back up, so he wasn't as crisp out of the gate. The Blue Jays really needed the innings out of him too, so I think he was rushed back when really what should have happened is he probably should have had 2 or maybe even 3 starts in AAA as a rehab just to get him to where he had to be. But they didn't have that option, right? There wasn't really depth for them to go to. Ricky Tiedemann was also injured at the time. So, the guy that they really thought was going to get some reps wasn't able to. Alek Manoah was still a big question mark and coming off of injury. So he was kind of thrust into the fire. And secondly, teams were sitting on his splitter. And when you're a 2-pitch pitcher and your out pitch is getting laid off and you're not hitting the spot with it, you're going to struggle. I mean, he has done a really good job of reintegrating his slider into his pitch selection. He's showing that about 15% of the time. I know he threw it the most he'd thrown in 4 years, 2 starts ago. So he's figuring it out. I think Kevin Gausman is going to finish this season strong, and I think that he is going to be the pseudo ace at the front of this staff. I say pseudo ace because I really believe there's about 5 legitimate aces in this league, and then everyone else is just kind of just a smidge under that. And he's just not Garrett Cole. I have no love for Garrett Cole, but he's a true ace.
Yeah, no, for sure. All right, so my best pitcher for the second half has to be Chris Bassett. I think, well, the reason is, for me, is just because of the fact that he has probably been the best starting pitcher on this rotation. It's actually insane how underrated he is, and like he didn't even get like an all-star nod or anything like that. Like pitched 200 innings last year. He's still doing the same thing. He's got like a 3.45 ERA, and he does not get enough attention. I don't know if you agree with that.
He does it with such deception too.
Yeah.
Like this isn't a guy that's going to overwhelm you with velo. He does it through thinking his way through the hitters. And I mean, 9 pitches, you mentioned it, dude. 200 innings last year. Like this is a horse in
Yeah.
this rotation. And his value's at an all-time high too. I mean, I don't know who in the world would be in this rotation if both Kikuchi and Bassett wind up getting moved at the deadline here, because that is a lot of innings. I mean, that is 360 innings from 2023 that would just be off the books all of a sudden mid-season, and there's not a lot in AAA. But I have a tough time not agreeing with you on Chris Bassett. I'm going with Kevin Gausman. I know that's kind of where I landed. Is just I think that he is going to have a much better second half. A rebound second half. But I love the Chris Bassett choice. And honestly, man, what an incredible signing. 3 years, $62 million. This is the dude who has pitched and been worth every cent of that pay so far. So I don't know what his future holds here for this team. I hope that he is still in this rotation next year, especially if all the lip service from this front office is true, that they actually are going to try and contend in 2025. I don't know how you do it without a guy like Chris Bassett logging innings and giving you quality starts. He's been so much better, Ryan, than I had expected when they signed him. He's been, I mean, to sign a 34-year-old like that, he's just been phenomenal. Like, and again, a guy that doesn't rely on velo. He's really a bit of a trickster out there, 9 pitches. So, yeah, Chris Bassett's a great choice.
Yeah. All right. Next, we go to kind of the tough ones to discuss as we get into the biggest regression position players, because as we know, this team has had its struggles and has had players that have maybe regressed from last year. Look at Kevin Kiermaier, and just this team isn't good, so we don't have too many solid players where we can look at like, oh my gosh, they're never gonna fall from grace. It's a lot of mediocrity, I feel. So I'll go first. My decision or my choice for biggest regression position player to start off would be he hasn't had the best first half, but I think it's going to continue that way. Is probably Dalton Varsho.
Really?
I as a outfielder, insane, incredible.
Yes.
He
Yes.
is absolutely like maybe the best
He's
outfielder in all
yeah.
of. Yeah. I have no problem saying that. However, the bat has been an issue. It's been a liability. It was a liability most of the first half of last season. At the end of the year, in September, he started coming alive again. He finished the season with 20 home runs, which was
Mhm.
a surprise to me. At this point, he's at 11. I can't see him getting to 20 home runs at this point.
He's a hot and cold guy, though. He might have another. I mean, if you look at when he hit his home runs, I think he had 8 in April. So,
Yeah.
like, he is a guy that I mean, that's not even really fair to say because home runs come in bunches. We just watched it happen to George Springer. I mean,
Yeah.
it's not specific to a player. When a guy gets hot at the plate and is seeing the ball well, of course, that's when he's going to pop a few out. But, yeah, that's interesting, man. Where do you see Dalton Varsho on a championship team? Like, because I look at him and I'm like, I think there is obviously a spot for him on a World Series winning team.
Yes.
Like I think that his outfield defense is so elite that there's a spot for him, but I can't see him hitting like he should be in the 9 hole. I think he would be an incredible 9 hole hitter. He really has the speed and the base running acumen to act as that second leadoff guy once you start getting through the order a couple times. I think his biggest problem has been he is being put in situations where he is not best suited to succeed. And that lies with the coaching staff a little bit and John Schneider and the way that they're setting up the lineups every day. And I think it also lies with some of the regression we've seen from other players and Dalton kind of being thrust into an offensive role that he's not really suited for.
Yeah.
This has been the story of this freaking team for 18 months, right? Is a lack of offense and that has caused panic and knee-jerk reactions to building a lineup and having guys in roles that they're not suited to because the guys that are supposed to be doing the heavy lifting aren't,
Yeah.
right? Guys like Bo Bichette, they're just not there right now.
Yeah.
So I I don't disagree with you on Dalton Varsho. I just don't know if the regression lies with him necessarily. I think he is what he is. He's a
Yeah.
guy who's going to hit between 200 and 220. He's a guy who's got a little bit of pop and going to run into some. I think 20 home runs a year is pretty reasonable to expect out of him. He's a guy who's not going to make any mistakes in the outfield and is going to run the bases really well and is going to wind up getting a triple here or there or going first to third in situations a lot of guys wouldn't be able to. He is just not an above average guy at the plate. And unfortunately, they're kind of in a situation where they've been forced to use him as that.
Yeah. That's the thing. If you look back at last year, they had him in almost every hole in the lineup. 1 through 9, he was either in the 1 hole, and then the next day he was in the 8 hole, and then he'd be in the 5 hole, and then the 6 hole. And I think for a player that's, I mean, you know, it can be a lot because I think he was expected of so much last year, being traded
Mm-hmm.
for Lourdes and Gabby Moreno, and he was supposed to be able to be both of those guys combined in terms of WAR and value because that's what he was traded for. You're trying to do an even trade. If you're doing an even trade, he probably thinks, oh, I'm good as both of those guys combined. I'm sure that gets into his head at some point, and I think he is a thinker. You hear from all the broadcasters and MLB insiders is that he loves going on the computer or on the iPads right after the game.
Mm-hmm.
He loves analyzing his swing. You heard about in the offseason he was chopping down wood. That was his way of trying to just
Yes.
break down his swing and how he's using his power in a certain way. And at the beginning of the season, he was doing a very good job. Spring training, he was great. I think I think just some things catch up to him, and I think yeah, baseball's such a mental game that the fact I think he sometimes struggles with that part of the aspect of the game is the mental
Mm-hmm.
side of it. It's hard.
And it is hard. And, he's a guy that has a tough time laying off the high fastball. He's
Yeah,
not alone on that. There's a few of those guys on this team. And the league has adjusted. They know that that's his weakness, and they go to it quite often. It was his weakness last year, and he kind of cleaned it up a little bit at the beginning of this season, which is why I think we saw him have such a good April. And then they adjusted again. And this is just the game between hitters and pitchers we've seen for 100+ years in this game, right? So the dream is 27-year-old Dalton Varsho can adjust again. And maybe there is a little bit more in that bat in 2025. Maybe he is a guy that can push an average of 230 and an on base of 350 and, run into 25, because that's what he was in Arizona, right? Like, so you cross your fingers and hope so. So I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm going to go the other way though, my friend. All right. So the guy I'm picking to regress, and I want to give a little caveat here and an asterisk on this name. I love this dude. He has done so well since getting called up. I just can't see his numbers holding. So I think that Spencer Horwitz is going to regress over the last half of the season. And a lot of this has to do with sample size. I mean, this is a dude who's been hitting over 300 since getting the call up from Buffalo in June. He has run into some, 4 home runs. This is a guy who say the knock on him was he has very little power. His on base percentage it's insane, dude. Like his on base percentage right now is 440. That's what it was in AAA, which is exceptional in AAA, right? So if you're going to walk more than you're so much more than the average guy. I mean, we just talked Dalton Varsho. I mean, I would give for just his on base percentage to be closer to 320, and we're talking Spencer Horwitz with a 440. But he's only had 137 plate appearances this year. He's had 181 in his entire big league career. So there's going to be some adjustments that go on here where pitchers are going to start pitching him differently or showing him different stuff. And I think he is going to struggle for periods of time. I think Spencer Horwitz is an everyday player. I think Spencer Horwitz is an above average everyday player. And I think that he's kind of found money for this Jays organization, a 27-year-old who has just kind of put it together. But I can't see him finishing this season as strongly as he started it. And he's being thrust into a situation that he's never dealt with at a big league level, right? Being that 2-hole hitter, facing the best pitchers in these lineups constantly, having the best relievers being brought out to face the top of the order. So I think it is going to catch up with Spencer. Again, I love this kid and I see nothing but success in his future. And I do think he's actually going to be a contributing member to this team for years to come, unless they decide to move him or something like that. Like, I really do think that Spencer Horwitz is going to contribute to the Jays in the next, 3 to 4 years, because he's under control and they've got him right in his prime. So, the lack of plate appearances is going to catch up to him this season. And so my guess for regression in the second half is going to be Spencer. I don't think it's going to be insane though, Ryan, right? Like, instead of hitting 310 like he has, he'll hit 280. Instead of getting on base at 440, he's going to get on base at 380. They're going to be some major regression, but it's still going to be above average numbers at the end. And I mean, that's what you're after with a kid you're calling up.
I honestly think you can't, like, you just can't expect somebody to hit 330 or whatever it is, 440 on base percentage. It was the same thing with Davis Schneider last year. It was like like he was hitting like 350 for like that little pocket that he had where he was hitting all the home runs. We're like, this is eventually going to go down. And then he cooled off quite a bit. And he went on that like 0 for 34 streak or whatever it was. And then, now we kind of know the player that Davis Schneider is. I think, again, he is like a 220 to 240 hitter. That kid has a little bit of power. Right now, he's also been in a little bit of a slump. And again, I don't think he's not a top prospect. He's not this giant prospect, nor is even Spencer Horwitz for that matter. I think Spencer Horwitz he's very valuable, and I think we know him as a valuable player, but you just can't go into it expecting that he's going to hit like that forever. I think most people are like that, but yeah. Anyway, let's move on. Next one, biggest regression pitcher. You go first.
So for biggest regression on pitcher, I think I'm going to go with Chris Bassett. But again, I'm gonna go with Chris Bassett in the very same way that I'm going with Spencer Horowitz. Okay. Look at what Chris Bassett has done at the beginning of this year. His numbers have been incredible. And when I think that he is going to regress, I'm saying this with the asterisk that this team is going to get worse. This team is going to defensively be worse after the deadline. I think Kevin Kiermaier is going to be gone. I think we're going to see more action in the outfield from guys with less big league experience. Stuart Baroa is a good example. You know, some of these prospects that have been called up. I think we could see Spencer Horowitz get some time in left field. And these aren't their natural positions, and they, even if it is in a case like Stuart Baroa, he hasn't had any experience at the big league level. This is going to affect the pitching across the board. But I think Chris Bassett in general, who tends to lean into the fly balls, could be affected, right? You know, so he's sitting at right now. Let me just get the numbers here so that we know exactly what we're working with. So this year he's got a 3.71 ERA.
Yeah.
I think him finishing the season closer to a 4 is what's going to happen. And it's just going to be that his defense isn't as stellar behind him. They're going to give up a few more runs. And I think that he is going to be a guy that as a pitcher who's doesn't rely on velo, I think it could catch up to him. He does have a lot of Ks though. Like he's really struck out a lot of guys this year. I've been impressed with the amount of strikeouts he's had for a guy not known as a K guy. You know, like it's one thing to watch a guy like Paul Skeens and be like, K, like it doesn't matter who's fielding behind him because for the most part, half his outs are going to come from strikeouts. Bassett's not that guy. You know, like what's he at here for K's? So this is just good listening, right? I'm sorry. My phone's just not working right now, but that's all right.
Chris Bassett, he is at 106 strikeouts right now.
See, so like he could very well,
yeah.
Yeah, he'll probably hit 160, which is, I mean, it's probably undoing some of what I just said because that's pretty impressive. But yeah, I just think Chris Bassett's going to regress if he's still in a Blue Jays uniform. I mean, if Chris Bassett goes to the Houston Astros, he's probably going to be even better.
Of course, that's the way it goes. That's the way it happened with Justin Verlander when he came over to the Houston Astros. That's the way it happened when Zach Greinke came over and Garrett Cole came over, and so
which by the way, dude, I still like your pick of Bassett for a guy to have a really good second half. Yeah. I just, you know, like I'm kind of taking the easy way out with this exercise, and I'm going with the guys who had really good first halves are probably not going to keep up with it.
Yeah.
I hope I'm wrong though. I hope I'm wrong.
Yeah, no, yeah, I know what you mean. For me, it was the biggest regression pitcher, Jose Barrios. I think in the last little bit, he has the first half, you know, we look at like that first month he had where it was incredible. He had that ace sort of value to him. He was, you know, going out in quality start after quality start. And I think that's kind of the idea of that pitcher is Jose Barrios is going to give you not a great outing, but a good outing. That's kind of who we know him as, I feel like.
And you know what's interesting though, Ryan, is that if you look at what he was doing in April, even though he had those incredible numbers ERA-wise, his FIP, so FIP is just adjusted for field and defensive work behind you. So his FIP was actually like a 5 while he was running with a 1.5 ERA. So that kind of tends to catch up to pitchers, and I think that's what we're witnessing with Barrios.
Yeah.
I hope you're wrong on this a little bit. I hope that it swings the other way. Barrios has had such a rough month. I hope that he kind of figures it out and we watch the pendulum come back to him being a little bit better than he has been. But I have a tough time disagreeing with you on this pick because he has struggled so mightily in the last month that, once you're on that slippery slope, and like we talked about with my pick of Chris Bassett, I mean, this defense and this team is going to get worse in the next 2 weeks, as crazy as that is to say.
Yeah,
they're just gonna lose some of those top guys.
you're right. Yeah. And I was gonna say, like, another thing about Barrios is I saw a tweet by Chris Black, who we all see all the time, I'm sure, on
Yes.
Twitter, with some great stats. Just talking about the stuff plus value, which is another stat that just goes to show how good the quality of your stuff, your pitches are. And in each year, we saw in 2023 was a little bit higher than 2022, which 2022 we all know was a terrible year. 2021, probably his best year in terms of stuff. And then this year, it's lower than both 2022 and 2023.
Mm-hmm.
And I saw that and I was like, this is going to catch up to him because we know he does get the hard hit balls. His fastball is not the greatest pitch in baseball.
No.
And
Yeah.
sometimes it ends up being hit directly at great outfielders like Kevin Kiermaier and Dalton Varsho. Like, how many times have we seen Barrios look into the outfield and just go like that because they just
Yeah.
incredible catch, And I feel like that's something that again, like you said, will catch up. It possibly can catch up to him because of the hard hit balls. The hard hit balls aren't good, for
Yeah.
the most part. Sometimes they sometimes your BABIP is nice for you. It's nice and low for you, and other times it ends up being really high. And I think that it's just gonna end up catching up to him. He's had trouble like in 2022 with throwing the fastball right down the middle and throwing it just too much in the zone. And he's
Mm-hmm.
a guy that likes to pitch around the edges. If we saw in the wild card game, that's all he was doing. That's all he was
Yeah.
doing. That was a great example of how he wants to pitch, how he wants to be. That was like the perfect outing I think we've ever seen until he got pulled, obviously. And then yeah, but I think those things
Out of
will.
curiosity, what was your thoughts on Barrios being pulled? Because I'm gonna tell you, people hate this take. I I don't even think it was that big of a deal. In fact, if you look at the final score, I feel like it kind of worked. I mean, you
Yeah,
lose.
well, for me, I always hear like people get mad because, he was dealing, he was shoving, and he was great. But you don't score runs, you don't win baseball games.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I know what you mean. I totally know what you mean. Like if you
Like Ryan had the Jays, instead of losing that game 3-1, won it 4-3. Are we even talking about this?
Oh no, I don't think so. I would definitely not think so. I
I
think
mean, I had fun with it. Like, I mean, this shirt I'm wearing literally is literally about that, right? Like analytics versus everybody. I just got such a kick out of how people act like analytics are anything more than just information that
I
needs
know,
to
yeah.
be translated. And
Oh,
then
we could go through an analytics talk
oh,
forever because that's the same thing. It's just like analytics is.
I love analytics. I hate the Blue Jays use of analytics.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's the people that are deciding on how analytics are used. It's not analytics.
Mm,
It's not some computer saying pull Barrios out of the fourth inning. It's the coach saying, here's some information. Here's some information. I don't really understand this, but I'm gonna pull him. That's the
yeah.
sort of thing. It's like, and I know what you mean. I totally know what you mean. If you don't score runs, that was the whole issue with last year. If you don't score runs, you don't win baseball games.
Yeah.
The way it is. It's that's the game. That's the game. You could have perfect pitching, and then Kikuchi came in. He again, like, that's a tough spot for Kikuchi to come in.
Yeah.
That's crazy. That's his first time ever being a bullpen position. He comes in with runners on base, and it's that stadium crowd. I'm not gonna,
Yeah.
everything about that was just a mess to
It
me.
was heartbreaking as a Jays fan because our biggest fear, which was that the offense was not good enough, was rubbed right in our face.
Yeah.
Despite how good the pitching was, despite how everything else lined up, and despite the fact that we started to get our hopes up that maybe we would see a division series. And
Yeah.
it just, I mean,
That's the way it goes, though. That's the way it
not
goes.
to go completely left turn here on you.
Yeah.
I just know we haven't talked to him yet, but I'm curious your thoughts on Yariel. Do you think I the more I've watched him, the more I'm like, they may have just landed themselves a number 4 starter in the rotation for $6 million over the next 5
I
years.
think I think he's got the velo as part of it. He's got the pitch mix. I think he's got that deception as well. He's very
Yeah,
got that fire too. He's an electric pitcher to watch. I love watching pitchers that show emotion on the
me
mound. I
too,
love it
man.
when Barrios comes out of a seventh inning jam, runners on second and third, strikes out the guy, and just
Hmm.
is absolutely pumped up. I
Yeah.
love that gets me going. That's one of my favorite things about baseball. And Yariel's pretty much the same guy, like in terms of emotion that he shows on the mound.
Yeah.
That and yeah, he's been great. Again, the deception part aspect of it, I think, is a huge part for him. Using that slow leg when he brings up his leg very slowly, I think that adds is a big factor in the way he pitches. It's like Johnny Cueto in a way. And Johnny Cueto,
Yeah, man.
in his prime, was a pretty darn good pitcher. Even in his last couple of years, like when he was with the White Sox, he was great too. So I
I
think
mean,
yeah,
like he's never pitched in majors in Major League Baseball up
yeah,
until this year. So I think, like we were just talking with Spencer Horowitz and you mentioned with Davis Schneider, like there's going to be adjustments. He's going to have some ups and
yeah,
downs. I mean, he's not going to be perfect, but I look at that signing and how little fanfare it got when it happened. I know I was even guilty of being like, why are you going out and getting a guy who's never pitched in the majors? Shouldn't we have someone more established? And
yeah,
then you look at some of the free agent pitchers that were picked up and the money that was spent on them, and it's like, man, he might legitimately turn out to be a starting pitcher, an everyday starting pitcher for $6 million. I
yeah,
mean, wow.
yeah. No, for sure.
Not to give credit to a front office that I want fired, but that's one. Put it in the good job
Yeah. All right.
category.
We got two more little segments right here, or little discussions. So next one. Final record prediction. And either will we make the playoffs or will we miss the playoffs this year? And I think we kind of know the answer to a couple of these things, if we will make the playoffs or miss the playoffs, but I'd like to hear your reasoning. And let's hear it. Let's hear it, Scott.
This team sucks.
Yeah.
I mean, people always joke on the show that we have toxic positivity because the walk-off does lean towards the positive. But man, after watching the same problems raise their head time and time again over the last 2 years, they don't have a cleanup hitter. They don't have a guy who's hitting enough power. They can't um they can't shut games down right now. Their bullpen is a dumpster fire, and I know a lot of this is out of their control because they were relying on their 3 big arms that were their most high leverage arms last year in Jordan Romano, Eric Swanson, and Tim Meza. I mean, Tim Meza's been straight up DFA'd. Eric Swanson's back from a run in AAA. Like, he was so bad they had to send him down. Jordan
Yeah.
Romano has just had arm surgery and is out until at least May, June next season. Who do you go to? I mean, even that game yesterday, dude, like that wound up being far closer in the end than it probably should have, right? Like I just how do they possibly put together, forget about making the playoffs, how do they even put together a 500 record for the rest of the year? And I'm not talking about with the games they've already played. I just mean with the remaining 60 games. Can they go 30-30? I don't think there's any possibility of that.
Yeah.
And they're going to trade Yusei Kikuchi. They're going to move Jimmy Garcia. bottom line, those are guaranteed. Those are the two pieces that there is no doubt that they are gone within a week or two.
Yeah.
So now you're removing another high leverage arm out of the bullpen. There's rumors Chad Green is going too. And if Chad Green goes, I mean, Trevor Richards is probably going to be traded because he has value. So now what are we doing here, man? Like, Ryan, we're going to be running with the AAA bullpen. Like it's going to be so hard to watch. And I mean, I was looking at some of the stuff from Fangraphs on the draft next year, and I mean, the way that the new lottery has worked out, you know, the White Sox don't even get an option, a chance at that number one spot because they're trying to prevent tanking. So the bottom two teams aren't even in it. So the Blue Jays have the fourth best chance of the number one pick overall in baseball. And it might be the second, or who knows, dude? It might be the best chance in baseball by the end of this season. I don't think they're ever going to get quite as bad as
the White Sox.
As the White Sox. And let's just pull up the standings real quick here and see where we're at. Because if you go down to the bottom, so the White Sox are 27 and 77. So they're out. And then same with the Marlins. So the Marlins also can't, the bottom two teams. So the bottom two teams can't, and the Blue Jays, no matter how bad they lose, will not be as bad as the Marlins, and they will not be as bad as the White Sox. They will not be as bad as the Rockies. The Rockies right now have the best chance, but the Rockies could even dip below the Marlins, and then the Marlins are there. So anyways, what I'm saying is it is far more likely the Blue Jays have like a number one or a number two pick overall than they make the playoffs, which is, I mean, very depressing as a Jays fan, but that's kind of where we're at.
A little exciting, yeah. Like, but yeah, I know what you mean. I know exactly what you mean.
And for final record, I mean, we're sitting at 46 and 45. Does this team win another 30 games out of 60? Like, is 76 even possible? I don't know. I think that this team finishes with 72 wins.
Yeah, that's a very, very likely possibility. For me, I agree with you. I agree that they will miss the playoffs. I think, again, there's so many flaws, I think, with this front office in terms of just knowing what is going on with this team. I feel like running it back next year, I want them to, but I like, you just don't have the assets, and in a division that's so tough, it's impossible to compete with these teams who are just miles ahead of you in terms of their farm system, in terms of the quality of players they have on the field. Look at the Orioles, look at the Yankees. Yankees are obviously struggling right now. But Aaron Judge can carry that team, and
Ryan, I don't know if you saw, like, just to touch on your farm system comment, with Aroldis Martinez getting hit with that 80-game PED suspension and Ricky Tiedemann going for a third opinion on his arm, which is pretty much, I mean, I would be shocked if surgery is not in his future here.
Yeah.
But Major League Baseball a week ago released that the Blue Jays farm system sits 30th.
Oh,
so it's the worst farm in baseball. And the team sucks. I mean, I didn't want to cut you off here, but I'm with you. So I'm with you 100%. Yeah. I think it's a little bit, not a little bit. I think it's incredibly arrogant of this front office to think that they can do anything but reevaluate where they're at and go for a retool here.
Yeah.
And I think 2027 is the next real possibility for us to sniff the playoffs. And that's if they thread the needle beautifully. That's if they lock up Vladdy. That's if they surround him with guys who can hit. That's if they get top value out of their assets. Assets like Bo Bichette, assets like Chris Bassett, Yusei Kikuchi, Jimmy Garcia. Has this front office done anything to give us confidence that they are capable of threading this needle. They haven't for me. I've said it before. This is a good front office that overcorrected after the 2022 season and proved that they're not a great front office. And to make that next step, you got to be a great front office. You can make the playoffs, get into the wild card as a good front office. I just don't see it possible to win the whole thing as just a good front office when there's so many great front offices out there. And that's overstating it. There's not so many great front offices, but there's half a dozen great front offices, and the Blue Jays are not in that category.
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. It's like another team I think I look at is like just in terms of jealousy is the Cleveland Guardians. I think a team that has one of the does not have a big payroll at all. They're one of the lower ranking payrolls in all of baseball, but they know how to draft pitchers and players. They just got the #1 pick, which is crazy, even though they had a down year last year, but it wasn't crazy bad. It wasn't like the worst thing in the world last year.
And this is where maybe as Jays fans, and I know the draft isn't a sure thing, even #1, but #1 is definitely going to do a lot for a team. Like the Jays managed to pick up Austin Martin 5th overall, and that got us Jose Barrios, right? So, there is big value in those upper picks of the draft, and maybe the Jays can Cleveland Guardians it and win, get lucky in the lottery and be in that top 3, be in that top 2.
Yeah. And no, I completely agree with you. I think their final record, I think it's a little bit better than what you had at 72 and what would it be, 90? Yeah, 72 and 90. I have 78 and 84. And I think that's even a bit of a stretch, but
okay.
I know. I think
you think they're gonna go? You think they're gonna play above 500 baseball for the rest of the way?
Maybe it's just the Blue Jays fan of me that wants them to because
man, me too.
It's just like for me, it really hit me like last night when I watched the game and they won and I was like, wasn't even satisfied. I used to be so happy. It used to make my night when the Blue Jays won a game. I used to, be on Twitter talking talking all about the Jays and just like looking at all the awesome things Blue Jays wins. I used to go.
It's not the same anymore. It's not the same. I agree.
Anymore. And it's
and you know what it is though, dude? I think it's the directionlessness.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that they are directionless. I'm just saying that as a fan base, we don't know what's coming up here. We're not 100% sure. We're assuming it's a sell-off. We don't know how deep that sell-off goes. We don't know what the plan is for 2025. We're just going on the lip service they're saying, which is to contend. And anyone that's a baseball nerd like you and I, Ryan, we have a really hard time swallowing that pill.
Yeah.
Because I keep thinking, how?
Yeah.
Tell me how we're going to contend in 2025.
Yeah.
We're going to continue to rely on a bunch of positive regression from these guys we were relying on to do that this year that didn't. I don't know. It feels bleak, which as a fan is why when they win, you just don't have that same satisfaction. It's just like, sure, they won one, but what now? Like, where do they go? And I hope that the trade deadline alleviates some of this turmoil for the fan base, because I'm such a diehard dude. I'm not going to stop watching, but it sure doesn't it doesn't give me the same joy and satisfaction that I watch baseball for. So, kind of a bummer.
Yeah, no, for sure. For the next segment and final part of this segment, firings. Do you think there will be any firings before the end of the season? And if so, who might be fired? And then if not, do you think it'll happen after the season has ended? What are you thinking?
So I have thought a lot about this, dude. I don't think there's anyone getting fired before the end of the season. That said, I think that John Schneider, Don Mattingly, Guillermo Martinez, most of this staff is, for lack of a better term, walking the plank right now. I think they're already dead. I think that they are definitely cannon fodder and are going to be eliminated by the end of the season. I think that Ross Atkins is a dead man walking. I think that the news came out. So the season ticket renewals just expired, and they pushed it 5 weeks earlier than they used to do the renewal. So last year, the renewal, you had to renew your season tickets by September 1, and the deadline just passed now. So what came out is that it's the lowest season ticket sales they've had since I think it was 2014. It's been a long time. I think it's like 10 years. So that is a real it's a wake-up call for Rodgers. It's a wake-up call for management that this fan base is really fed up with this front office and the direction that this front office has taken, this overcorrection and reliance on defense and pitching, the lack of run scoring. So my guess is what happens is Mark Shapiro's at the helm for the deadline. We'll never know exactly how this goes down, but I think that Ross Atkins doesn't actually have any power right now. At least I would hope not, Ryan. Right?
Yeah.
Like if this is a guy who's literally walking the plank, if this is a guy who's already been fired in the mind of the ownership and in Mark Shapiro, then why the fuck would you let him make any actual decisions for the future of this organization? And I know that there is an argument to be made that he's going to need to try and find a job in baseball elsewhere, and he would never do anything to sabotage himself. And that's probably true. But why do we trust a guy who we're going to fire?
Yeah.
Like forget about him fucking things up so bad that that he can't get hired. I don't think he'll do that. And if anything, I think he'll play it too safe. I think that he won't take any big swings because he doesn't wish to mess with that resume he's getting ready right now.
Yeah.
So I don't know. To kind of sum it all up, I really think Mark Shapiro is going to remain the president and the head of this baseball operation. He has made Rodgers too much money when it comes to the renovations and the planning for income outside of baseball. And I think that everybody else is fucked.
Yeah.
I think everybody else is gone, man. And I think it has to be that way. I really do think that there may be some dudes that retain their employment, maybe some folks in the high performance department, maybe some folks in the mental department. You don't want to get rid of all of these assets and talented people.
Yeah.
But I think that you're going to have a new voice at the head. I think that Ross Atkins will be replaced. And whenever you bring in a new general manager, they're normally given the opportunity to bring in their own people. So that would mean John Schneider, Don Mattingly, Guillermo Martinez, the hitting department and the manager is gone. Will Pete Walker be kept around? Maybe. That said, he's been in the organization since forever and been one of the main voices for that pitching staff since 2012. Maybe it's time for a new voice there too, even though he's done a good job. I think anyone who has worked under a boss for a long period of time will tell you that even if they're really, really good at their job, you hit a point where the words they're saying don't mean as much to you anymore.
Yeah.
And I think that's where we're at with this coaching staff and manager and general manager for that matter.
Yeah. I think that's what happened. I feel like I heard a quote, and that happened with Charlie Montoyo. Like something about that was kind of the same thing with him. His words did not mean as much to the players. I think there was a little bit of loss of respect in terms of that, and that's the flaw of I think of baseball GMs and managers, is because sometimes they know they're on the hot seat, and it's such an awkward position for them, I'm sure. And it's such an awkward position for us because you look at Alex Anthopoulos, he knew his contract was expiring. He was up. He was on the hot seat too. And he ended up just selling the entire farm system in that trade deadline. A lot of it had dried up quickly. And by like 2016, after that year, we had to retool. We had to trade every asset away pretty much in order to kind of bring our farm system back. Obviously, our farm system got a lot better when we picked Vladimir Guerrero Jr. And Bo Bichette and other pitchers like Nate Pearson who were a top prospect.
Yeah.
But yeah, in I know exactly what you mean. I think that I think Ross Atkins is bound to be fired by the end of this year if he doesn't. If something goes. I know Mark Shapiro and Ross are good buddies, but this is a business. This is a business.
Yeah.
This is not. This is not. You guys. Friendship doesn't really.
Man, when in life has it ever worked? Like, listen, everyone who's like, oh, Ross Atkins and Mark Shapiro are a pair. They'll never be separated. It's like, that is such bullshit.
Oh
In
yeah,
what world has a human ever been given the option of, okay, it's this guy or you and this guy? Who do like,
yeah,
of course he's going to fire Ross Atkins. Like,
yeah.
if that's what Rogers tells him, your job or his job, you think he's going to pick Ross? Come on, man. Like,
And I honestly don't even think Mark Shapiro has done that terrible of a job. Like
no.
I don't think he's done obviously like his position isn't as much right now. It's probably a bit different than it was in years past because I'm sure Ross Atkins
Mhm.
doing most of those deals. But again, Mark Shapiro is a knowledgeable. He was a GM for the Cleveland Indians at the time, now Guardians, and he has I'm sure he knows what he would be doing in a trade deadline. He's up to date with all the players and
Of
prospects
course.
in baseball. He's a smart man. He has to know this
Yeah.
stuff. And so, but in again, in
And
terms,
I will give Mark credit for getting the most money out of this ownership group that any president at any point has ever gotten out of this.
exactly,
Whether the money went and was allocated to the proper places and the proper players, I would argue it has not been. That said, this is a team that holds the 7th highest payroll in all of baseball and is a luxury tax team. What more as a fan base can we want? Right?
yeah,
Like, they're spending the max that they are going to spend. Uh, we're a top 10 team in payroll and have the ability to go head to head for almost any free agent that they want. Fuck,
yeah,
dude. They were in it for Shohei Ohtani. Like, I don't even care about all the bitter Toronto fans that are like, that was just, we were being played. It's like, no. It went right down to the wire. We were number 2 for Shohei Ohtani, a $700 million free agent.
yeah,
You do not get to go after Shohei Ohtani with that kind of money unless you have the ability to actually pay it, the willingness to actually pay it, and the ownership go ahead to go and spend that kind of money.
yeah,
So that's you know what? Despite it all, maybe if they're going to spend their way out of this, maybe that is an option. I just don't know how they make this a contending team in 2025, but we
yeah.
can wrap up there, Ryan. But like, honestly, man, like, I hope I'm wrong. I hope you're wrong. I hope we're all wrong. Like, I hope by the middle of next season, we're like, I can't believe we all wanted this blowing up.
Yeah.
But
Anyway, I think that's again, it's a good place to end it off here. Scott, I thank you so much for coming on the show.
this
And
was a lot of fun, man. Hit me
yes,
up anytime, buddy.
absolutely. No, absolutely. I will 100%. It was a great time talking about the Blue Jays. Obviously, we would prefer to be talking about them if they were a good team and would be love to
Yeah.
talk about them back in 2022 or 2021, whatever it was. It would be a lot more fun that way, but this is where we're at. This is where we're here. And it's still enjoyable always to talk baseball.
It sure is, my friend. It sure is. I'm going to take a real quick second here for a little self promo as well. August 15th. So that's Thursday, August 15th. Baseball Town going down at the Comedy Bar on Bloor and Ossington. By the way, Ryan, I got a couple tickets for you under your name. You just got to go to the box office and we'll see you there. But
All
for
right.
everyone watching, you can go to thecomedybar.ca. Tickets are there. They're only $20. This week's This month's guests are going to be great. Scott Mitchell of TSN is going to be there. Nobody knows more about prospects and the farm system with the Jays than Scotty Mitchell. We're going to have former Toronto Blue Jay pitcher Jesse Litch. Some of you from the 2000 to 2010 era of Blue Jays will remember Jesse. He actually came on the show recently, but he's going to be in Toronto doing some baseball camp, so he's going to make his way down. And we've got Leslie Nope is our special guest, Blue Jays Twitter darling. And then we're going to have the Tampa Bay Rays versus the Houston Astros as our team roast battle. Again, it's been a lot of fun. And if you just like connecting with baseball people and the community, this is a great place to do it. So Comedy Bar, 7 p.m., August 15th, comedybar.ca for your tickets. Ryan, thank you for letting me do my little spiel there.
No worries. You guys heard the man. Make sure you go check out that website, Baseball Town. It sounds incredible. I unfortunately have not been.
I know you just missed last show, but
I know I just missed it.
We're working on it this time.
We will be there. I promise. Yeah, Ryan and I will make it. We 100% are gonna make it. So
looking forward to it.
Again, so much fun. Everyone listening, Bleeding Blue podcast. It's on Instagram, Twitter, TikTok. We are on everything, all things, all platforms you listen and get your podcasts. And go check out the WALKOFF podcast while you're at it too. They're great. They got some great interviews and just great discussion of baseball. You hear Scott right here. You know how he talks, and when you want to hear that every day. Let's see it. Yeah. So yeah, again, thank you guys so much for listening. Scott, thank you, and see you next episode, guys.